2022 has come and gone, so figured I might as well do what other people do and offer up my top 10 favorite films from this year. Now, full disclosure, there's still a lot of films I haven't seen yet, so it's important to consider that this is merely my thoughts as of the end of the year. I am certain that there are more films that would have been on this list if I'd watched them, but I think I've seen enough films that I can actually give you 10 films that I think are worthy of actually being on a top 10 list. So, let's get into this. Starting off at number 10, we have The Menu, a pitch black dark comedy that heaps on the social commentary without the tiniest flickers of mercy. I don't want to talk too much about this one because the best way to experience this film is going in knowing as little as possible, but I will say that this film is an incredible balancing act of cruel, mean, hilarious, and genuinely frightening. There are moments that aren't quite as unpredictable as the film thinks it is, but this is a finely crafted film that will satisfy the cinematic palates of anyone who enjoys dark humor. Number 9 is The Outfit. Mark Rylance continues to showcase just why exactly he's an Oscar winner, with his incredible lead performance at the front and center that manages to keep you on your toes. I'm a huge sucker for films that mostly take place in one location, because when done right, you can create a real intimate and claustrophobic experience, and this film is a prime example of that, to the point where you could very easily assume that this was based on a stage play. For the record, it's not. The script is also incredibly fine-tuned, with interesting characters, razor-sharp dialogue, and a plot that plays out both naturally and unpredictably at the same time. The film's ending doesn't quite land as well as it should, namely because it goes on a little bit too long, but this is otherwise a pretty masterful film that tells such a simplistic tale with equal amounts of skill, finesse, and intrigue. Number 8 is, shockingly enough, a Michael Bay film, and it's Ambulance. This film is Michael Bay at the top of his game, going back to the basics for the type of fun, almost brainless popcorn action films of the 80s and 90s, but done in such an intriguing way. You can practically feel just how giddy Michael Bay is behind the camera this time around, as he exploits his drone camera for all it's worth. The action scenes are brutal and well shot, and the central relationship between the two main characters feels tangible. This is an adrenaline pump that, while probably technically worse than the films underneath it on this list, was also one of the most fun times I had at the theater all year. Number 7 is The Black Phone, a surprisingly chilling and thought-provoking horror film that not only is absurdly intelligent with how it manages to bring so many elements together in perfect harmony, but also because it actually managed to do the impossible and get not one, but 2 phenomenal child performances with both Mason Thames and Madeline McGraw. Ethan Hawke is also absolutely mesmerizing as the main villain, managing to bring to life such an evil character. And if you want to dig further into the subtext, the film also contains a surprisingly thought-provoking Christian allegory about the nature of prayer. Had the film been tightened up a hair in the first act, I would say that this is an instant horror classic, but this is still pretty fantastic work as is. Number 6 is yet another horror film, and by far the biggest surprise of the year, and it was Barbarian. Much like The Menu, this is another film that really works best if you go in as blind as possible. The only thing I will say as a warning is that there is a decision made after the first act that's really going to put you on edge, but as the film progresses, you slowly start to understand why the film is presented the way that it is. But it was that unique presentation that made me realize that this was a film that deeply respected its audience's intelligence and patience. This film is genuinely frightening, maddening, disgusting, surprisingly funny, and actually a thought-provoking story about the effects of victimhood that is subtly interwoven throughout the film. Oh, and the acting is great from absolutely everyone involved. Number 5, this is probably going to shock a lot of people that it's this high, but it's Jackass Forever. Jackass Forever is, to put it simply, the funniest comedy I saw all year. I was just sitting there, awestruck, watching these guys put themselves and their bodies through some of the most agonizing tortures imaginable, simply for the amusement of millions of people. I just can't explain it, but there's something almost comforting in seeing a bunch of people all together putting themselves through immense pain, torture, embarrassment, and humiliation simply because they want to make people laugh. And that, I think, is something worth commending. Plus, this is just a really hilarious comedy that consistently made me laugh and dry heave in equal parts. My only real regret is that I wish I had seen this film in theaters with the largest crowd possible. Now with number 4, we're getting into the truly fantastic films of the year, and the first is The Northman, a visually exciting, raw, and brutal retelling of the story of Prince Amleth. This film does its hardest to transport you back to the time of the Norse Vikings, and it is unbelievably successful at that. Robert Eggers continues to impress me as a director, with his paying attention to detail with his historical settings, so much so that I think he may very well be the best director working today. This is probably his most accessible film to date, namely because the story is admittedly a pretty basic one due to adapting a story that's so old, but man, oh man, is the presentation of this film just pure, raw revenge epicness. It is fantastic and had me mesmerized from start to finish. Number 3 is Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. This film, to put it simply, succeeds in pretty much every single way the Disney live-action remake failed. It updates the story, even altering the message of the original story, but it manages to do it in such a thought-provoking manner. This movie feels a lot more Fable-esque in the way the story is presented, probably the closest in tone to the original book, along with some incredibly dark and creepy imagery, but it's also a surprisingly warm story, even in the midst of all the sadness. On top of that, the stop motion in this film is simply gorgeous. One of the most beautiful looking films I've seen in a while. It is, put simply, a wonderful film. Sliding into the number 2 spot is Everything Everywhere All at Once. To say that this film is ambitious would be a colossal understatement. This is a film that is brimming with creativity, and yet, stunningly enough, it manages to do so without collapsing in on top of itself. The action scenes are spectacular and fun. All the acting is phenomenal, especially Michelle Yeoh and Ke-Huy Quan, who both do Oscar-worthy work. And for all the film's weirdness and quirkiness, what ultimately elevates this film is that, at its core, this is a surprisingly soft and tender story of a mother trying to reconnect with her daughter, and it tells that emotional story just perfectly. This movie was written and directed by the Daniels, who had previously done Swiss Army Man. And if these two films are anything to go by, they have a real skill at managing to make the bizarre completely poignant. And I cannot wait to see what they do next, however weird it may be. And finally, the absolute crowning achievement of 2022 is Top Gun Maverick. Talk about a film that completely took me by surprise by how fantastic this was. Sequels to films released 36 years ago should never ever be this good. And not only did this film hold a candle to the original film, I think it surpassed it. This movie is everything that popcorn entertainment can be. It's exciting, it's thrilling, it's funny, the characters are memorable and likable, and played by talented actors, and they bounce off of each other perfectly. The film's entire third act was some of the most exhilarating pieces of filmmaking I have ever seen in my life, and I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. This film is proof that mass audience entertainment doesn't have to be dumbed down, and that cinema doesn't need to be needlessly dark or relentlessly depressing to be great. This was, without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, the best time I had in the cinema all year. It was so good that I willingly went back to the theater 2 more times to experience it again. It really is that great. So yeah, that's my top 10 for 2022 as of the end of the year. So I'm pretty sure there's plenty of great films that I missed. So make sure to let me know if there were any particularly good films that I missed in ye old public forum down below. And I guess that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in hearing more reviews, you can subscribe to the channel, or you can check me out on my Letterboxd account. The link to that is in the description below. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.